So you've been grinding Valorant, but you want to give Counter-Strike 2 a try, but you don't really know where to start. Well, we got you covered because in this video, we're going to be going over the Valorant Player's Guide to Counter-Strike 2. In it, we're going to be breaking down the key differences that you have to know and some fundamental mistakes that Valorant players would make if they take their knowledge and try to apply it to CS2 right now. You're going to lose a lot of games, and we're going to fix that in this video. Well, welcome to Full Force. My name is Mills, and if you want to learn Counter-Strike as quickly as possible, consider subscribing right now, and let's get into it. Now, first off, let's talk about the weapons. And in Valorant, no matter what side, attack or defense, you get to use any weapon available to you. But in Counter-Strike, there are both T sides and CT sides having different weapons available to them. So you can't play with every weapon throughout the whole game, although you can pick it up off the opponent's dead corpse. Now, the closest thing to the Valorant Vandal would be the AK-47, and this is only available on the T side, so you're not going to be able to use it 100% of the time. Now, on the CT side, you get a couple of options with the M4A1S and the M4A4. Both of them are slightly different, but they're more similar to the Phantom than anything else. Now, there are various pistols that you have on both T and CT side, and some of them are going to be similar to the gun style in Val, but there's a lot more options as far as pistols are concerned, specifically in Counter-Strike. But also, pistols on average will have more ammo per clip in Counter-Strike than they do in Valorant, where most of the gun's ammo is limited. Now, before we move on to recoil differences, I did want to talk about aim punch and armor, which is super important for Counter-Strike in particular. If you get shot in the body or the head without any armor, you get massively aim punched, which could be very jarring, making your character flick upwards, which means that if you don't have armor, you're at a huge disadvantage no matter what duel you're in, and that makes armor that much more important in Counter-Strike than it is in Valorant. Now, next up, we're going to talk about recoil. And in Valorant, every weapon has a set amount of bullets until the spray becomes random. And there's not even first shot accuracy on a lot of weapons unless you're like crouched and standing completely still. This means that long sprays are impossible to be consistent with, even if you're incredibly good at Valorant. But in Counter-Strike, every weapon has a set spray pattern, making perfect sprays a skill that you can learn over time. Now, in order to spray with any weapon, you simply need to do the opposite of what the bullet pattern is. So you could spray on a wall and learn the pattern of every gun, and it can be good to just do the opposite to practice. And we're going to be doing a full spray control guide soon, so make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. Now, next up, we do got to talk about movement, and in general, movement in Counter-Strike 2 is faster than movement in Valorant. Now, while the base movement is faster, do keep in mind that there's not going to be that crazy mobility that you see out of some characters in Valorant that can make it so you have to flick really far, so your crosshair placement can be a bit more predictable in Counter-Strike versus Valor at times. Now, in addition to that, we got to talk about counter-strafing, where really counter-strafing is not that important in Valorant, where you can simply just stop and your bullets are fairly accurate. But in Counter-Strike, if you don't counter-strafe, you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. And counter-strafing is done simply by stopping your character instantly by hitting the opposite movement key. So if you're swinging with D, you tap A before you stop to counter-strafe. This means that you earn first shot accuracy far quicker, and you can basically stop on a dime and still hit that one tap over and over again, or in my case, whip your entire mag still. Now, I know this is a little bit weird to learn at the start, but I want to make it clear that you have to learn it if you want to master movement and aim in Counter-Strike. It's really not optional. Now, also with crouching in Valorant, it's extremely dangerous and it's pretty inconsistent to do because of how inconsistent spraying is. But in Counter-Strike, you can use the crouching to your advantage a bit better because there's tighter bullet spread and you have the ability to control your sprays a little bit more easier. So crouching overall is a bit stronger and more versatile in Counter-Strike than in Valorant. Next up, we got to talk about utility, abilities versus grenades. In Valorant, every agent has their own kit with unique abilities, and no one is going to be the same on your team. But for Counter-Strike, everyone is relatively the same, even across T and CT sides for utility, besides something like defuse kits. Now, you will drop your nades and defuse kits on the floor when you die, and you're only going to be able to bring them into the next round if you live, unlike Valorant, where if you don't use an ability, you keep it. And every single character has access to most of the same kit, including the HE grenade, the smoke grenade, the flashbang, the Molotov/incendiary, and the decoy. And all of these have their own use cases, right? If you want to deny an op angle or enemy information, you could smoke. If you want to potentially swing somebody and they're going to be blind, you can flash. If you want to deny a rush, you can Molotov. And every single character can have access to these things, so every single individual character can have more agency on their rounds. Unlike in Valorant, where sometimes you're playing a character that doesn't have anything to deny a person's play, but that's exactly what's happening. In Counter-Strike, you can basically buy your kit based on your money and your position every single time. Doesn't matter what character you are. This also means that you can deal with problems a lot easier than just begging and pleading for your teammates to help you. You keep dying to an op, you don't have to hope and pray that your brimstone smokes off the freaking op angle. You could do it yourself, you can flash them out, you can basically come up with creative solutions yourself to deal with problems that you're running into the games, instead of hoping and praying that your teammates will pick up what their role is supposed to do. Now, next up, we do got to talk about map differential, and it's not a spike, it's a bomb, and spikes are a bit different than bombs. So spikes are going to have a 7-second defuse, 4 seconds to plant, and 45 to detonate once planted, and there is a halfway mark while diffusing. But the bomb is different. It's a 10-second diffuse, 3.4 seconds to plant, and 40 seconds to detonate once planted. Now, if you do buy a diffuse kit, which is 400 credits, you can actually cut the diffuse time in half on the CT side. You got to remember to buy a diffuse or you lose, or something like that. But really, it's very, very important to recognize that the numbers are not 1 and 1, and there are going to be key differences in how you play post-plant because of how much time you have left remaining, and the fact that you can't halfway mark the defuse. Next up, we got to talk about CT versus T, and it's the same base game mode as Valorant, the tactical shooter, plant, defuse, but in Val, a round is 140 seconds before spike is planted, and in CS, a round is 155 seconds before the bomb is planted, giving you a little bit of extra time to work with. Next up, we got to talk about melee, and knifing actually gives you a $1,500 bonus for getting a knife kill, which is just not a thing in Val, which is incredibly strong. So there's actually a legitimate incentive to get a knife kill, although it could still cost you the round if you go for a risky one and die. So evaluate that risk versus reward. Thankfully, though, the melee is much more consistent in Counter-Strike than it is in Valorant, where it feels like it just phases through people. Next up, we got to talk about movement, and there's really only 2 movement speeds in Valorant, weapon out or knife out, but that's not the case in Counter-Strike, where you're going to have a different speed depending on weapon loadout, and that's not a thing in Valorant at all. So the speeds are going to differ depending on which weapon you have out. Heaviest are going to be heavy, and snipers, you're going to move the slowest with these weapons out, then rifles, then SMGs, then pistols being the fastest outside of having that knife out or the bomb out. So there's different varying speeds depending on the weight of the weapon that you have out. And also, if you inspect the bomb, there is a chance for you to get a really cool special animation, but it's very rare. Next up, we do got to talk about economy, and we're going to be doing a future guide on this because there's a lot to talk about, but here's the base level things that you need to know. There is a money cap difference in Valorant versus CS, Valorant being 9,000 credits and CS being $16,000. Now in Valorant, you're going to get a 200 credit per kill no matter what bonus, but in Counter-Strike, it's different bonuses depending on weapon class, and we're going to throw it up here so you can compare the differences. Now there's also a much more complex round bonus, and there's a ton of variables that we're just going to list here, such as bonuses for planting, bonuses for defusing, round streak losses, and more. So the more money per loss, up to 4x, and it's kind of similar to Val, but we're going to be going into a lot more detail in our economy video about that specific topic. Now, I know coming from Valorant, even as a good player, can be incredibly daunting when trying to learn Counter-Strike, but no worries, Full Force Guides has got you covered, so press that subscribe and like so you don't miss out on any of our future videos, and let us know what videos you want to see next. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.